Hi everyone, this video is about the HP 50G graphing calculator, which was introduced in 2006 and remained on the market until 2015. And the 50G was the end of a long and mature product line that started with the HP 18C in 1986. And these were all built on the Saturn architecture and the reverse Polish list for RPL programming language. Saturn was a CPU architecture designed by Hewlett-Packard and fabricated by NEC that powered the HP 71B pocket computer, as well as HP's Pioneer series and early graphing calculators. But from 2003, due to technical reasons, NEC could no longer manufacture the Saturn processor. From then on, the 39S, the 40GS, and the 50G were built on an emulated Saturn processor that ran on top of the ARM CPU. And the 50G was also the last of a long line of HP calculators built on RPL. And RPL was both the programming language available to the user of the calculator, as well as the language the calculator system was implemented in. Physically, with its black plastic body and its white, gold and orange shift keys, the 50G was a return to a more traditional HP look as compared to the 48G and 49G that came before it. And a variant of the 50G with a blue and white colour scheme specifically tailored for high contrast was also available, but it didn't sell as well as the black version. And the 50G also introduced an improved keyboard, which is a problem for the 49G calculators. And if you compare it to, say, the 48G, you can see the keyboard is spaced slightly closer together, and there's an extra row of keys. The keyboard on the 50G is split into fixed sections with different coloured and sized buttons, and it's okay without being great. One unusual aspect of the keyboard layout from this era of HP's graphing calculators is that there's a regular sized enter key on the bottom right of the keypad, as opposed to a large enter bar on the 48G or HP Prime. And this has the effect of pushing the arithmetic operator keys up, so they're no longer vertically aligned with the digits in the way that you might expect. And the HP Prime moved back to a more traditionally aligned keypad. The 50G takes 4 AAA batteries plus a coin cell battery for memory backup, and for a normal user they tend to last for months of intensive use. And the 50G has 512 megabytes of RAM, mini USB and IR ports, and an SD card slot. The 50G has a monochrome 131 times 80 pixel display, and this resolution does feel quite dated for a calculator that was on the market in 2015. For example, this is the same pixel width and only 20 vertical pixels taller than the 48G, which was introduced 25 years earlier in 1990. And this resolution can be quite limiting when viewing 3D graphs or even Greek symbols. And the HP Prime has approximately 7 times the pixel count. A powerful aspect of the 50G is that most of its features, including arithmetic operations, algebra, matrix operations, and programming, are all integrated into the same experience. And the 50G can work in algebraic or RPN modes. So although the 50G shipped by default in algebraic mode, it does require shift key to enter brackets, and there's an enter key rather than equals key. So in RPN mode, to calculate 2 plus 3 times 4, you'd enter those numbers onto the stack and then hit multiply and plus. And for RPN mode, there's a useful stack menu that's available through Tools menu. And here you get soft keys for the common stack operations that HP's RPN calculators often have dedicated buttons for. So for example, there's a swap key to switch X and Y. And you can also roll down the stack. There's also a math menu that provides a lot of numeric functions organized by category. So say if we look into the hyperbolics menu, you can see we could apply hyperbolic sine, say, to pi radians. And the 50G has 2 ways to present these choose boxes. Personally, I prefer menus mapped to soft keys, but they can also be presented as a pop-up menu list. And the 50G has a lot of modes and flags that you can use to customize the experience. So if I hit mode, here I can switch between RPN and algebraic. And there are also CAS settings and also a whole bunch of different system flags that control a lot of the experience. So flag 117 controls the menu display, and say if I uncheck that and go out, if I bring up the math menu again, you can see that it is presented differently. And I guess with around 100 different flags and modes, yeah, that's a lot of different configurations. And experienced users tend to have favorites. So finding that configuration that works best for you is part of the experience of owning a 50G. Foundational feature of the 50G is the equation writer that allows equations to be entered like they would appear in a textbook. So for example, to calculate the sum of a series of x squared from 1 to 10, I can go into the equation writer and select sigma function, and then I'll enter x as my variable from 1 to 10, and we're summing x squared. And then after that, I can apply operations to that formula using RPN. So say I can enter 5 and multiply, and I can hit eval to see the result. And even though I use the 50G primarily in RPN mode, I appreciate being able to jump into the equation writer to enter complex formula in algebraic notation, and for me it's the best of both worlds. And so for vectors, you can enter these using square brackets. Or you could use the powerful matrix writer. And complex numbers are represented in parentheses. So say if I take the square root of -1, I get 1i, and say if I square that, I get -1. And to enter fractions, you can use the equation writer. So for example, if I enter 45 over 30, I can evaluate this to turn it into a decimal. And the 50G allows units to be associated with values via the units menu. So to enter 100 miles, we can enter 100 and then go into the units menu, pick length, and then select miles. And say that object travelled 100 miles in 90 seconds. We can enter 90 and then pick time in seconds. And if we divide those, we can get the speed in miles per second. And to convert that to SI units, there's also a function in the units menu, so tools, U-base. So that's 1788 meters per second. And say to convert that to another speed unit, we can pick say kilometers per hour and use the left shift function to do that conversion. So another key feature of the 50G is the file manager or filer. And the filer is very much like the old DOS navigator, where you can traverse in and out of directories, including those on your SD card. So here you can see my home directory, and I have 2 subdirectories, and I can use the arrow keys and enter to navigate into, say, the stocks directory. And in here I have some RPL programs, lists and numeric values. And the filer allows viewing, renaming or deleting objects, and you can also create subdirectories. And you can use the up arrow key to traverse back up to home. And you can also use the change directory soft key to change the current working directory. So say if I change to the stocks directory, when I return back to the RPN view and hit the var key, you'll see that those objects in the stocks directory are mapped to the soft keys. And if I store a value now into a variable, it will automatically be written to that current working directory. And also with the 50G, you can define a custom menu that gets brought up when you hit the custom key. And the custom menu is defined through a special CST variable that stores a list of function names in curly brackets. So I'll recall the CST variable now. And you can see that I've assigned stack swap, constants library, and a few other functions I often use into that menu. And so to add another function to the custom menu, you can edit that variable and say, well, we can add the function for the fast Fourier transform. And we'll assign that back into CST. Now if I hit the var key, you can see that new menu item at the end. 50G is also able to solve various types of numeric and symbolic equations, and to replicate the classic HP solver capability for solving equations with a single unknown, we can select the solve equation item from the numeric solver menu. And here I've already entered the full distance equation that calculates the distance an object falls under gravity in time t. And the 50G automatically has created a form where you can enter your known values and solve for an unknown. So say if I enter 1 kilometer into the distance, I can solve for time, so that's 14 seconds. Or say I can enter a time, let's say 5 seconds, and solve for d. And another really useful function in the 50G is the equation library. And this library consists of more than 300 equations grouped into 15 technical subjects, and it's available via the apps menu. And we'll pick a relatively straightforward example of a current divider. So for this, the 50G can show the equation, the variables, and even a picture of the problem. And so if we start the solver, we can say enter some values. So let's say we'll enter 50 amps into I, 20 ohms into R1, and 10 ohms into R2. And then we can use the right shift key to solve for I1. And the 50G also has a computer algebra system built by Bernard Paris, the same French academic who later built XCAS, which is integrated into the HP Prime. So to use the CAS features, we can again use the equation writer. So let's enter, say, sine of x squared. And we can highlight the expression using the arrow keys and pick a CAS operation. So let's pick derivative with respect to x. And then we can evaluate that to get our answer. Another example we could do is an expansion. So say we wanted to expand, let's say x minus 3 all to the power of 5. Again, we can highlight the equation, go into our commands and find expand. And the CAS features on the 50G are all pretty easy to use. Of course, the 50G also supports graphs of various kinds, so to plot a simple y equals fx graph, you can hit the y equals key, and you can enter a function and hit draw. And the 50G also supports a bunch of other types of more complicated charts and graphs in the 2D, 3D menu. But again, the low resolution monochrome screen of the 50G is pretty limited for graphics. So there are 5 different ways to create programs for the 50G. There are user-defined functions, user RPL, system RPL, Saturn assembler, and ARM assembler. So user functions are simple arithmetic functions that you can assign to soft keys. So as an example, I've created a simple function to calculate the area of a triangle using the base and the height. And then to define that function, you hit the def key. And now I can enter a base and a height onto the stack and hit the triangle button. And you can also define functions using reverse Polish list or RPL. Now, I've got a separate video about RPL programming on the HP48G, so I won't go into too much detail here. But RPL is a postfix stack-based programming language that is somewhat a mashup of RPN, Forth, and Lisp. And so if I go into the filer, I can pick an example of a simple RPL program. And this one calculates the nth number in the Fibonacci series. So RPL programs are all defined within Guillemette characters. And this one declares that it takes a number n from the top of the stack. And it has a test to see whether n is less than or equal to 0. And notice that the Boolean operation comes after the operands. And otherwise it pushes 0 and 1 onto the stack and defines a loop from 2 to n, calculating the next number in the series. And in the end, it switches the last 2 numbers on the stack and drops the top one off. And I plan to make some more in-depth videos about programming on the 50G, particularly focused on system RPL and assembler options. So that's a quick summary of the calculator, and there's a lot of functionality I left out, such as the ability to solve differential equations, its statistical features, and its ability to manage libraries. And the 50G is a really powerful calculator which can do most things you could throw at it, often in multiple ways. But all that power does come with a steep learning curve, perhaps the steepest of any calculator. But to me, the 50G has really 3 key strengths. The first is around the integration of the experience. So as an RPN user, I feel like RPN mode is really complete on this calculator, but also through the equation and matrix writers. It combines the best of RPN and algebraic entry, as well as supporting matrices for first-class citizens. And also its algebra features are completely integrated with the rest of the experience. There's no separate CAS mode like on the HP Prime, for example. The second strength is around its wealth of programming options, and when you combine these with the ability to easily assign functions or values to hierarchies of soft keys, and the ability to load third-party libraries, you can certainly extend the functions of this calculator to suit your individual needs. And this power is reflected in the range of programs you can download for the 50G, from basic libraries to games or emulators that have been cross-compiled to either ARM or Saturn architectures. I think a third strength of the 50G is the ability to personalize the user experience to your needs through its multitude of modes and system flags. But inevitably, the 50G also has some weaknesses, and largely those are rooted in its hardware, especially its keyboard and display. But overall, I think there's something quite special about the 50G, and in 2006 it was really considered a return to form for HP. And it was HP and arguably the world's most advanced scientific calculator for almost a decade, and over that time it built up a legion of users that build their professional careers on the calculator. So overall, the 50G is, I think, one of the great HP calculators. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful.